Hey team, and welcome back to the channel. So the universe is full of spirits. At least that tends to be what the practice of astrology and magic implies or is sort of predicated upon. One type of spirit that is specifically referenced in astrology and has been enjoying a bit of a resurgence of interest lately is the Daimon, who, among other things, serves as an intermediary between humans and the gods. The Daimon's relevance continues to this day in some unexpected places, and the journey of the Daimon and how it got here is worth talking about. Truly, I've wanted to do a video specifically on the Daimon for some time now, but the subject is rather quite dense, so instead of covering it all in just sort of one video, multi-hour long thing, we're going to divide it up into a bit of a series. In this here first video, we're going to cover the basics of what the Daimon are, their origin and early development. Subsequent videos will cover other aspects of the Daimon, including their role in dreams and astrology, so be sure to stay tuned for those future episodes of this little series as well. So what is Daimon, or what are the Daimon? And there are several different ways to characterize them, and opinions on them will vary, as we'll soon find out. But if I had to provide a sort of explanation of the Daimon based on my own learning, my own understanding, and my own experience, I would describe them as semi-divine spirits whose role is to execute divine and natural functions. Daimon accomplished this in different ways, and it's safe to say that there are separate classes or types of Daimon that have specific jobs or execute particular types of divine will. This is something that Iamblichus kind of breaks down for us a bit, and we'll talk about that when we get there. There are Daimon who carry the rain, Daimon who have a symbiotic relationship with the natural world, such as the Daimon of mountains and rivers, Daimon who serve as guardians of cities, and Daimon who are charged with guiding people. We know that this is their function in no small part because they were almost always characterized this way, so that helps, but also the very name itself. Daimon, the word's origin, can be traced back to a Proto-Indo-European root da, meaning to divide or to distribute. This etymological root was married with Greek culture's emphasis and respect for the practice of drawing lots as a means to select or make decisions, and the Daimon became the executor of that which is allotted to us in the form of our fate or our destiny. This all paints the picture of Daimon as beings we could more safely describe as somewhat neutral, perhaps lawful neutral, to borrow a little bit from Dungeons & Dragons alignment there. They're here to give us what is ordained for us, the good and the bad, and everything in between. They don't seem to take pleasure in human misery, but as we'll see, they do have some incentive to see humans thrive, which might tilt them more towards good than evil. Are there evil Daimon? Personally, I don't think so. But Daimon do seem to fulfill jobs that we would describe as harmful or unfortunate. And we'll talk about this more when we discuss the origin of the Daimon in a little bit. Aside from overseeing our fates, I'd say the other important function the Daimon fulfill is that of intermediaries between the physical and the spiritual worlds. Daimon are consistently looked to bridge the gap between the worldly and the divine. This can be through the execution of divine will on the material world, carrying prayers and offerings from the faithful to the gods, or allowing humans to interfaith with gods through oracle and other means of divination. So I guess that would be my elevator pitch about the Daimon. An elevator pitch that's 3 paragraphs and 416 words long, so it's a long elevator ride. But where did the concept of Daimon come from, and how has it evolved over time? To answer this question, we have to go back to the mythic past. We know that Daimon originated as an idea in Greek popular religion, but the first known recorded use of the word Daimon is found in the 8th century BCE in Homer's Iliad. The line that contains this word, which is referencing Athena, reads, "Return to Olympus, to the palace of aegis-bearing Zeus, to join the company of the other Daimonas." In this context, it seems pretty clear that the Daimon that are referred to are the other gods on Olympus. It's in Hesiod where Daimon falls away as a descriptor for the gods, instead finding itself replaced with alternative words like Atenaton and Theos, immortals, and gods. Daimon primarily show up in Hesiod's works and days, in perhaps the most famous reference to the Daimon in antiquity, where Daimon are the spirits of the first sort of incarnations of humans that lived in the Golden Age, who are now tasked with guiding us in our age. Daimon rarely come up explicitly in Greek myth as sort of spiritual entities, but we're more likely to see them referenced as the source of a feeling or a compulsion that a human experiences. E.R. Dobbs, in his On the Greek and the Irrational, shares with us. But the most characteristic feature of the Odyssey is the way in which its personages ascribe all sorts of mental as well as physical events to the intervention of nameless and indeterminate daimon, god, or gods. These vaguely conceived beings can inspire courage at a crisis or take away a man's understanding, but they are also credited with a wide range of what may be called loosely monitions. Whenever someone has a particularly brilliant or a particularly foolish idea, when he suddenly recognizes another person's identity or sees in a flash the meaning of an omen, when he remembers what he might have forgotten or forgets what he ought to have remembered, he or someone else will see in it, if we're to take the words literally, a psychic intervention from one or more anonymous supernatural beings. This idea that we find in Homer was likely the seed for the power of the daimon to inspire or reveal that will continue to be ascribed to them throughout the daimonic tradition. Interestingly, this still lives on somewhat in popular language, where we might say something like, "Hold on, this idea just popped into my head." If we take these words literally, we're suggesting that the idea is a thing outside of us that kind of moves into and inhabits us. This is also where we begin to see the more nuanced nature of daimon, as they are said to provide but also snatch away helpful things like courage, insight, and memory. Now, in the myths and stories, these daimon are more or less simply doing as they're told. We see an example of this in the Iliad, where the character Teucros laments that a daimon broke his bowstring at an inopportune moment. We, as the reader, know that this is actually the will of Zeus, as a method of protecting Hector. Daimon can also be servants of cosmic justice, as seen in the Iliad, the Works and Days, and the Orestia. Pandora's jar, famously, is filled with what are called keres, the evil spirits that are crafted to punish mankind for the theft of fire. A daimon called an Alastor exacts judgment on Agamemnon and his brothers for their sins and those of their father. Just a little light murder and cannibalistic deception, we're just gonna do that. And then the Furies hound Orestes for avenging his father's murder. He's, of course, mistaken. Each of these examples shows spirits acting in what we as humans would say are objectively negative manners, but they end up being an enforcement or a kind of punishment in response to some crime. Moving away from our poets and our playwrights, our philosophers also took up the concept of daimon. Empedocles, most famous for his codification of the four elements, which ended up playing a significant role in the development of philosophy, of physics, of astrology, medicine, and children's entertainment, discusses the daimon in his On Purifications. This is a 5th century BCE work that survives only in fragments, but details the experiences of a daimon who has become tainted and is exiled on Earth. Reborn now as a human, this daimon was tainted through the consumption of meat and acceptance of animal sacrifice. In order to regain its place in the daimonic sphere, the daimon now human must become pure, mainly by abstaining from meat. Empedocles' account here is different from previous incarnations of the daimon in many ways. The first and the most obvious is the idea that daimon can be downgraded in their status and can be human or become human. This is not a concept we see in other examples in Greek religion, which seems to carry the understanding that daimon are a separate kind of creation than humans. Remember, the initial explanation is that they are spirits of the individuals who lived in the Golden Age. They're not around anymore. Hesiod does speak of Phaethon, a demigod son of Eos, who Aphrodite makes a temple keeper and uses the term divine spirit to describe him in this new role, but it's unclear how literally we're meant to take this. But I would argue that it does make some sense for a demigod, rather than a normal human, to be able to become something more divine, like potentially a daimon. On Purifications revolves primarily around meat consumption as a religious sin, and it is difficult in some ways to take it as a serious contribution to the field of Daimonology because of it. And just once I'd like to do a video where I don't talk about animal sacrifice, that'd be great. But On Purifications is more of a handbook on Empedocles' Pythagorean beliefs, including, of course, the transmigration of the soul. Pythagoras famously told his followers that they could become gods. And, of course, don't forget militant vegetarianism. We all love that. It would be very easy to write off On Purifications entirely if it wasn't for the fact that the idea of daimon becoming corrupted in some way by blood sacrifice would come back up again in about 700 years, so stay tuned for that. It's also worth noting that abstinence from meat and alcohol are very common purification practices in religions all over the world, including, of course, ancient Egyptian ritual, and that's something that Pythagoras and Empedocles would have been very likely aware of. The next big development for the daimon comes through the works of the philosopher Plato around the turn of the 4th century BCE. Daimon play a large part in various events involving the philosopher Socrates, which are reported, of course, by Plato and perhaps most famously in the myth of Ur. The clearest explanation of the daimon comes to us from the Symposium. He, love, is a great daimon, and like all daimon, he is intermediate between the divine and the mortal. He interprets between gods and men, conveying and taking across to the gods the prayers and sacrifices of men, and to men the commands and replies of the gods. He is the mediator who spans the chasm which divides them, and therefore in him all is bound together, and through him the arts of the prophet and the priest, their sacrifices and mysteries and charms, and all prophecy and incantation find their way. For God mingles not with men, but through love, all the intercourse and conversation of God with man, whether waking or in dreams, is carried on. The wisdom which understands this is spiritual, and all other wisdom, such as that of arts and handicrafts, is mean and vulgar. Now these spirits or intermediate powers are many and diverse, and one of them is love. Events and other dialogues provide more examples of some of these powers. The Apology is a dialogue that recounts the events of Socrates' trial, having been accused of corrupting the youth of Athens by questioning, among other things, traditional religion and political practices. Socrates finds himself having to defend himself in court. During his defense, Socrates talks about this sign that comes to him as a voice and has visited him since childhood. He explains that it is this sign that is the daimon that he is being accused of worshipping instead of the city gods, but that he doesn't actually worship it, and it never tells him what to do, only that it sort of warns him of things that he should not do. Splitting hairs a little bit, aren't we? We get another glimpse of Socrates' relationship, or at least understanding of this sign, as he speaks with his friends before he goes to his execution chamber. Here he shares that at no point did this voice forbid him from going to the courthouse or try to stop him from speaking at all during his defense. He gives some context here and says that it's actually not that uncommon for the voice to sort of cut him off in an effort to keep him from going too far and getting into trouble, but not this time. Socrates finds comfort in this instead, as he sees it as evidence that death is not an end or evil. Other Platonic dialogues have Socrates mention this daimon. In the Phaedrus, the voice seems to be sending Socrates a sign that a speech he just gave was not that great, where he says, "The sign that usually comes to me came, and I thought I heard a voice from it which forbade me going away before I cleared my conscience. For all along while I was speaking my discourse, something troubled me, but now I have seen the errors of my ways. Phaedrus, a dreadful speech it was, a dreadful speech, the one you brought with you, and the one you made me speak. It was foolish and somewhat impious." In the Republic, Socrates says the daimon would not allow him to go into politics, and we even see examples of the daimon forbidding Socrates from taking specific students. I do need to clarify here that Socrates does not explicitly call this entity a daimon. Later authors did this, and it's unclear if he associated it with this type of spirit. Sometimes he calls it a god, using the word theos, other times a divine sign, calling it a daimonia simeon, and then other times it's just a voice, the word phony. It seems that later writers like Plato, Plutarch, and Apuleius made this connection more overtly. The Apology is part of what literary scholars call the first period of Plato's writings, written sometime in the 390s BCE. The role of the daimon would become expanded in works produced during the second period from 388 to 367. Hesiod's Works and Days described the daimon as spirits of the beings who lived during the Golden Age, who now work in the service of mankind, guiding and watching over them. Just like Bubbles guides and watches over me. We see a peek behind the curtains of this in Plato's famous myth of where not only do great men like Socrates have a daimon they're in communication with, but everyone has the opportunity for this kind of relationship. The myth of is a famous part of Plato's Republic. It is a story in which a soldier who is presumed dead awakes upon his funeral pyre and shares his experiences while he was in the land of the dead. Initially, is part of a procession of souls being judged, where some are sent downwards with signs that detail their misdeeds, while others are sent upwards and are given tokens indicating their righteous judgment. Presumably the final soul in line, is told that he actually won't be judged, but will be the messenger of mankind of these experiences, and that he needs to pay attention. In this story, the rewards of the righteous and the punishments of the wicked appear to be finite, for we're told that we are taken to a glorious meadow where two processions of souls arrive. One comes up from below, and one comes down from above. Says, "Those which arrive from time to time appear to have come as if it were from a long journey, and gladly departed to the meadow, and encamped there as at a festival. And acquaintances greeted one another. And those that came from the earth questioned the others about the conditions of yonder, and those from heaven asked how it fared with those others. So we all get to come together and kind of have a party no matter which way we end up going initially in the afterlife. After about a week of Earth time, the party up and leaves to go to their next destination. Here, they see fate spinning the wheel of necessity, which appears to be kind of a stylized version of what would become the Ptolemaic universe. An undescribed prophet for the fates announces to the group of souls that it's time for them to once again incarnate on the earth, and they will be choosing their next life in order according to lots that they will draw. This figure then opens a jar and casts forth the lots, which the souls then pick up. Each lot has a number, which shows the order that they will choose their next life. It's made pretty clear in the myth that there's no scarcity of options, as the prophet reveals a number of lives greater than the number of souls that will be choosing. So there's plenty to choose from, and there will still be lives left over. Each goes in turn in front of the fate Lachesis, who assigns to them the spirit or the daimon as, quote, the guardian of his life and the fulfiller of his choice. The daimon then takes them to Clotho to ratify the choice that they made, and finally to Atropos, who spins out the thread of this life's destiny. Afterwards, the souls go away to another site by the river Lethe, where they're instructed to drink from the river of forgetfulness. Then afterwards, they will all go to sleep, and sometime during the night, the sound of thunder and earthquakes erupts, sending them hither and thither as they begin their journey towards rebirth once again. Though they appear very briefly, the actions and the intended role of the daimon as the guide to the upcoming life is a clear allusion back to the etymology of the word. The daimons step more fully into their roles as executors, that which is allotted to us. This time, according to Plato, allotted to us through the choices made by our own pre-incarnated souls. In the Timaeus, Plato reaffirms the divine aspect of the daimon and how it encourages us to find and embody the divine aspect of ourselves, saying, quote, we should consider then that God gave to each a daimon, and we say it dwells within us at the top of the body. We are a plant, not of an earthly, but of a heavenly growth, and this spirit raises us from earth to our kindred who are in heaven. Shortly after Plato's time, the daimon's popularity and role in the cosmos would explode in importance. In 331 BCE, Alexander the Great founded the city of Alexandria, which would of course go on to become a major port city, the new capital of the country of Egypt, and a major melting pot of Greek and Egyptian ideas. A spirit named the Agathos daimon existed as a topos daimon, or a spirit of the place, since the 5th century BCE in Greece, but here it was a minor household protection spirit whose form was associated with snakes. The origin of the snake motif is unclear, but some suspect that it is because snakes prey on vermin, and indirectly, of course, end up protecting the household's food and inhabitants from these diseases that rodents carry. If true, this has the potential to be the biggest dropped ball in history. How much better off would it have been if the daimon had been associated with, I don't know, cats? Far be it for me to question religious ideas, but I mean, cats also hunt vermin, so Bubbles and I aren't upset by this. She was upset with that. How exactly the Agathos daimon became part of the Egyptian worldview is unclear. The Alexander Romance, a mostly sort of dramatic and folk-tale-ish account of various exploits of Alexander's life, gives us the following account, which is worth quoting in full. And they began to build the city of Alexandria in the middle of the plain, and a serpent used to come to those who were busy working, and it frightened the workers and put a stop to the work. Mood, right? Because of the serpent's raids, Alexander came and said, let it be captured by the workmen, whoever it is found tomorrow. Upon receiving the order, they subdued and slew the beast. Whoa, that's not what he said. When it came, Alexander asked that a shrine be built for it there, and they buried the serpent in it. When the shrine had been built for this divinity, he set it upon the pillar. Many serpents came out of it and slithered into the homes that were now near there. For Alexander was still there on the 25th of Tibi, building the city and that very shrine for the serpent. Thus, when these snakes came into the houses, the gatekeepers worshipped them as kindly spirits, for they are not poisonous like wild animals. Rather, they drive out poisonous beasts. Sacrifices are made to him as being of the family. On account of this, to this day, these customs are kept among the Alexandrians on the 25th of Tibi. They garland all beasts of burden, offer sacrifices to the gods, and render homage to the serpents who safeguard the home, and make a distribution of bread. While the story is probably not a true and accurate account of events, it likely served as a piece of local folklore. The story explains why snake images are so ubiquitous in this period in Alexandria. It also discusses the establishment of the Alexandrian founding and serpent worshipping holiday of the 25th day of Tibi, which is February 2nd in the Gregorian calendar. So, what have we learned, class? Groundhogs are out, Agathos Daimon is in. The Agathos Daimon quickly becomes the topos daimon of the entire city of Alexandria. This association was famous enough to even be mentioned in the Potter's Oracle, where it was foretold that upon the destruction of Alexandria and the defeat of the Greek invaders, the Agathos Daimon would leave Alexandria and instead reside in Memphis, the old Egyptian capital. With its relatively nondescript features, the Agathos Daimon quickly became associated with an Egyptian divinity named Shai, due to a massive amount of overlap between the two. Both of these deities are associated with serpents. They are both associated with protection of people and of places, and they both represent destiny in different ways. The Agathos Daimon quickly assimilated many of Shai's characteristics and powers, and its importance in the Egyptian religion. Further syncretism occurred after the founding of the Serapeum in Alexander for the god Serapis. Serapis is a Greco-Egyptian deity that evolved out of a combination of Osiris and Apis bull worship. The worship of Serapis was highly encouraged as a matter of public policy by the newly appointed ruler of Alexandria, Ptolemy I Soter, as a way to bring together the native Egyptians and new Greek citizens. So we big happy family and worship the same god that we just made. Due to Serapis' unique combination of divine influences, he acquired many solar characteristics, including themes of rebirth, renewal, abundance, and resurrection. The shadow of the Serapeum over Alexandria caused a strong connection between Serapis and the city, but Alexandria already enjoyed the protection of Agathos Daimon, so we ended up having a kind of a split where Greek citizens were much more open to the worship of Serapis than their Egyptian-born brethren, who are more likely to worship Agathos Daimon, or Serapis in his original form of Osar Hapi. Instead of fighting over rulership of the city, Serapis and Agathos Daimon slowly merged into one, as best exemplified by what is now the sort of quintessential Agathos Daimon iconography of the Serapis-headed serpent that is now best seen on coins from around the early 110s CE. So we'll just share. We'll just become one and share. That seems fine. This blurring of the lines between and combination of Agathos Daimon, Serapis, and Shai created a new type of super divinity who enjoyed the powers and realms of all three. Agathos Daimon kept its original association of personal and household protection, but from Serapis, Agathos Daimon received a strong connection with the sun and other solar symbolism, as well as ideas of good fortune and wealth, and then from Shai, we see Agathos Daimon associated with the ideas of fate and providence. This evolution of Agathos Daimon created two different kinds of daimon entirely, what I call Big D Daimon and Little D Daimon. Big D Daimon is the Agathos Daimon at its true height of divinity. Here, this form of the daimon is associated with fate, divine providence, and the will of humans who have to maneuver through it. Agathos Daimon in this respect represents the will of the divine or the divine plan, that which is supposed to happen, rather than that which just so happens. Humans can also partake in the power of the daimon when they have to interact with a divine plan, but what this looks like exactly will depend on your philosophical outlook. The Stoics will see it in accepting and going with the flow of their lot in life, while someone else might see it in their attempts to renegotiate their fate and shape it more in line with their own personal wills, goals, and desires. It's easy to assume that the promotion of Agathos Daimon to cover these grand and important metaphysical concepts would have overshadowed its earlier identity as a personal guardian spirit. This, fortunately, was not the case, as we have personal accounts of people from this time period discussing their experiences with their own daimon. This is the little d daimon, the version we met in the Platonic dialogues and in early Greek religion. This is the daimon as personal guardian who is here to guide us through our lives. Little d daimon leads us through big D daimon and ensures that we experience what all we are meant to experience, the good, the bad, and everything in between. This personal relationship with the daimon is also how we might execute our own version of big D daimon functionality, of renegotiating our fate into something more in lines with our own desires and expectations of what we want to experience in life. So where does the daimon go from this lofty position as overseer of fate and executor of destiny? Well, it goes to Plutarch, who throws it right into the bus. In, in some ways, Plutarch's interpretation of the daimon is the beginning of their sort of downward spiral. But we'll talk more about this aspect of daimonology in a future video. Instead, please won't you join me next time for an exploration of daimon and their dominion in the dream world.